You've seen him. He doesn't panic. He doesn't post about it. He doesn't need a crowd watching him solve the problem. He just fixes it. The pipe bursts at 2 a.m. He's already moving. The deal collapses. He's already rebuilding. The argument explodes. He's already thinking 3 steps ahead. Most men fall apart when pressure hits. They need validation. They need someone to witness their struggle. They need an audience to perform resilience for. But this man? He disappears into the problem and reappears with the answer. Here's what nobody tells you. This isn't a skill. It's not just experience. It's a specific psychological architecture, a deep, almost invisible rewiring of how a man relates to chaos, to silence, and to his own identity. And once you understand what's actually happening inside these men, you'll never look at silence the same way again. Most people misread these men completely. They call them quiet. They call them distant. Some people mistake their silence for coldness, for emotional unavailability. Some even mistake their calm for indifference. But here's what's actually happening beneath the surface. These men have made a fundamental psychological decision, one that most people never make. They decided, at some point, sometimes consciously, sometimes through hard experience, that reacting is weaker than responding. The average person has merged their identity with their emotions. When something goes wrong, they feel it as an attack on who they are. Panic becomes their first language. Complaint becomes their first tool. But the man who fixes things in silence, he separated himself from the noise. He built a gap between stimulus and response, not because he doesn't feel, but because he chose function over display. This is the hidden architecture that most people will never develop, because to develop it, you have to stop seeking emotional approval from others. And that's one of the hardest psychological separations a man can make. Here's the deeper truth, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. Men who fix things in silence were forged by a specific kind of pressure, not the pressure that breaks you, the pressure that teaches you that no one is coming. Psychologists call it internal locus of control, the belief that outcomes are determined by your own actions, not luck, not other people, not circumstance. But this isn't just a belief these men hold. It's a belief they tested, repeatedly, until it became identity. When you grow up, or grow, through situations where waiting for help cost you more than acting yourself, your psychology restructures. Your nervous system learns. Silence is faster. Emotion is expensive. Action is currency. These men aren't emotionless. They've simply learned to run their emotional processing in the background. They feel, but they don't stop moving. This is what psychologists call compartmentalization at the highest functional level, not suppression, not denial. A trained ability to hold complexity without collapsing under it. The result, under the same pressure that makes others loud, they go quiet, and they start fixing. Now here's what nobody wants to hear. These men are rare, because most people are addicted to being witnessed. We live in a culture that has confused broadcasting pain with processing it. People post their breakdowns. They perform their burnout. They narrate their struggle in real time, not because it helps them heal, but because the attention feels like proof that the pain matters. The man who fixes things in silence doesn't need that proof, and that terrifies people who do. Here's the dark psychological reality. Most men will never develop this capacity, not because they lack intelligence, not because they weren't taught, but because silence requires you to trust yourself when no one is watching, and most people have never built that trust. They've outsourced their self-worth to external validation for so long that the idea of solving something quietly, with no witness, no applause, no acknowledgement, feels meaningless. Think about that. A problem solved, a crisis handled, a situation repaired, and they need it to be seen, or it doesn't count. That's not strength. That's dependency dressed up as confidence. Understanding this psychology doesn't just explain these men, it gives you a map. Because here's what changes when you stop needing to be witnessed. You move faster. Every second you spend broadcasting your struggle is a second you're not fixing it. When you compress that loop, when stimulus goes directly to response with no detour through performance, your speed of execution becomes almost inhuman to the people around you. You become harder to manipulate. People who need audiences are easy to control. Want to stop a man who broadcasts his emotions? Give him attention. Feed the performance, he'll stay stuck there. But a man who processes in silence has no lever for that. There's nothing to pull, nothing to feed. He's already moved past the moment you're trying to exploit. And here's the identity shift that changes everything. When you stop needing credit for fixing things, the things you fix become yours in a deeper way. Your competence becomes internal property, not something you display, something you own. Other men will notice this without being able to name it. They'll sense the difference between a man performing strength and a man who has become it. So how do you build this? Not through motivation, through rewiring. First, remove the audience from your internal definition of success. Ask yourself honestly, would I still fix this if no one ever knew I fixed it? If the answer is no, that's your work. Start there. Second, practice delayed narration. When something goes wrong, set a rule. No talking about it until it's resolved. Not because your feelings don't matter, but because narrating a problem before solving it trains your brain to substitute expression for action. Third, study your own panic response. Most men have never mapped what actually happens in their nervous system under pressure. Not the feeling, the sequence. Where does your mind go first? To blame? To broadcast? To freeze? Identify the pattern before you try to change it. Fourth, develop tolerance for invisible wins. Fix something no one will see. Solve something no one will acknowledge. Sit in that silence and don't fill it. This is the actual training ground for silent power. The men who fix everything in silence aren't born different. They made a series of quiet decisions, each one trading the need to be seen for the power to act. They chose function over feeling, movement over noise, identity over approval. And slowly, invisibly, they became the kind of man that people only notice when something needs to be fixed. There's a version of strength that requires no witness. No applause, no audience, no acknowledgement. Just a man, a problem, and the quiet certainty that he is enough to handle it. That man doesn't announce himself. You only realize he was there after the crisis passes, and somehow everything is fine. The loudest men in the room are fighting for something they've never been given. The silent ones already have it.